I rented the house because I needed to be somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere without neighbors or memories or anyone who might look at me and see what I'd done. And the place looked perfect on the app, old but solid, tucked into the trees outside a small coastal town with no HOA, no traffic, no reason for anyone to knock on the door except maybe a misplaced delivery, and the photos showed a simple layout: 2 bedrooms, 1 office, a wraparound porch, and a living room with big windows that looked out over a wooded slope that dropped into fog most mornings. And when I arrived, the lockbox code worked exactly as promised. The key slid into the door like it had done it 1,000 times before, and I stepped inside expecting the kind of empty echo you get when a place hasn't been lived in for months. But it wasn't empty. Not really. Not in the way you'd expect. Because the second I opened the door, I felt something that didn't match the photos. Something invisible but present, like a heat that came from the bones of the house itself instead of the thermostat. And I told myself it was just residual energy, just the weight of old furniture and bad design. But the longer I stood in the entryway, the more I noticed the little things. The shoes by the door weren't mine. The smell in the air wasn't dust or old wood. It was soap, and not a kind I used. And when I opened the fridge, there were groceries inside. Fresh ones, not from the owner or a welcome gift, but things someone had bought with a plan for dinner. Half a lemon wrapped in foil, a carton of eggs with only 4 missing, and a jar of salsa opened just enough to prove it had been used recently. I stood there in silence, listening to the refrigerator hum like it was trying not to answer the questions I hadn't asked yet. And I walked the room slowly, trying to find any sign that someone was still here, still inside. But the house was quiet, perfectly still. No movement, no sound upstairs, no signs of life. And yet the upstairs bedroom smelled faintly like shaving cream. And the window was open, just a crack, even though the weather app said it had rained the night before. I checked every corner of that house, top to bottom, attic to basement, even the crawl space beneath the porch. And when I was satisfied that I was alone, I unpacked in the guest bedroom instead of the master. Not because I was scared, not yet, but because something about the master felt wrong, like it had already been claimed. That night, I locked every door, double-checked every latch, and sat in the living room with the TV on mute, staring at my reflection in the black screen until it stopped looking like me. Around 2:43 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. I didn't move at first, not because I was frozen or panicked, but because some part of me needed to hear it again to be sure, needed to confirm that what I'd just heard was exactly what it sounded like. 2 distinct steps across the old wood floor of the upstairs hallway, followed by 1 creak near the top of the stairs, and then silence, so complete it felt like the house was daring me to break it. And I waited, eyes locked on the ceiling above me like it could reveal a shape or a shadow or some crack of movement that would turn this into a misunderstanding. But nothing moved again. No follow-up sound, no sigh of wait, just a silence that thickened with every passing second. And when I finally stood up and picked up the flashlight from the side table, not because the power was out, but because I didn't want to turn on the lights and let whatever was up there know I'd heard it, I crept toward the staircase, each step of my own making more noise than anything I'd heard above. And by the time I reached the bottom stair, I realized I was holding my breath like someone who had already been found. I called out just once quietly, "Hello?" the way you do when you don't actually want an answer. And of course I didn't get one. But the house didn't feel empty anymore. Not like before. It felt still in a way that was deliberate, like someone had heard me and decided to remain exactly where they were. I climbed the stairs slowly, scanning each frame of the hallway with my light. And when I reached the top, I saw nothing. No person, no shape, just doors and wood and old dust. But the door to the master bedroom, the one I hadn't touched, the one I had specifically avoided, was open now by about 3 inches, just enough to show a sliver of inside, a triangle of dark carpet and part of a chair that hadn't been there earlier. I should have turned around. I should have left. But something about that doorway didn't scare me. It challenged me, like it had been waiting for me to approach since the second I stepped into the house. And when I finally pushed the door open with the side of my foot, the room was empty. Lights off, windows shut, no signs of anyone. But the closet door was open, and inside, hanging neatly from the rod, was a jacket I recognized. My jacket, one I had lost over a year ago in a hotel room 400 miles away and never seen again. I reached for it with numb fingers, and when I touched the fabric, it was still warm, still mine. I backed out of the room without turning my back to it, closed the door without slamming it, and went downstairs where the TV was no longer on mute, where the screen had changed to static, and the volume slowly began rising by itself. At exactly 3:03 a.m., the power cut out, and I heard the front door unlock. I didn't run to the door. I didn't shout. I didn't even move, not right away, because the sound of the lock turning wasn't fast or panicked or forced. It was calm, smooth, like someone who belonged here was quietly letting themselves in with a key they'd always had. And the moment the bolt slid open, the house fell into a different kind of silence, the kind that doesn't wait for you to speak, but watches to see what you'll do next. And I stayed crouched behind the arm of the couch, phone clutched in one hand, flashlight in the other, waiting for footsteps or breathing or any sign of presence. But there was nothing, no door opening, no floor creaking, no movement at all. And after what felt like a full hour of crouching in stillness, I forced myself to peek around the corner toward the front entryway. The door was shut, locked again, as if it had never been touched, as if the sound had never happened. And I wanted to believe believe I imagined it, that I was sleep-deprived or spiraling or carrying stress from before I came here. But when I finally stood and checked the lock, the metal was warm, freshly handled, and the air in the entryway smelled different now. Colder, sharper, with that faint tinge of air that's only ever been inside someone else's lungs. I checked every door and window again, upstairs and down, flashlight flickering slightly now, pulse hammering in my temples, and everything was as it should be except for one thing. The guest bedroom where I'd been sleeping, the one I had closed, was now wide open, and the sheets on the bed were pulled back in the exact way I leave them when I get up in the morning. Not messy, not chaotic, familiar, as if someone had gotten out of bed a few minutes before I came in. I stepped in slowly and saw something else too. On the nightstand was a glass of water, and next to it, my phone. The second one, the one I lost last month. The same cracks in the corner, the same lock screen photo of me standing in my old apartment wearing a shirt I threw out 2 years ago. And the battery somehow was at 100%. I picked it up, and the second my thumb touched the screen, it unlocked without a passcode and opened straight to a voice memo. One I didn't record, labeled with today's date, titled, "Don't Forget Who You Are." I played it. It was my voice, but not just my voice, my breath, my pace, my fear. And it said, "If you're hearing this, you've already made contact. Don't try to change the locks. Don't use the mirror. Whatever you do, don't ask your name out loud." I dropped the phone, and as it hit the floor, I heard something move upstairs, 2 soft footsteps, the exact sound I'd heard that first night. And I realized then, with a clarity that made me sick to my stomach, that it wasn't replaying. It was sinking. I didn't go upstairs again, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because some part of me already knew who or what was up there. Not a stranger, not a ghost, not a person, but something shaped like me, something that had been practicing, rehearsing, getting the timing right, and every object in the house was starting to confirm that idea in small, quiet ways, like how the jacket in the closet wasn't just my brand, but had the rip on the left cuff I got during a road trip I never talked about, or how the books on the shelf downstairs now included titles I remembered reading but never owned, all in the right order, even dog-eared on the exact pages I used to pause on back when I lived alone and thought I was forgetting nothing. And I started checking drawers, flipping through closets, scanning corners, and everything I found felt like something left behind by me, but not in this life, not in this sequence. I went into the office and found my handwriting on a pad of yellow paper I'd never seen, a list of grocery items I haven't bought in years, and at the bottom, in smaller letters, a phrase written twice: "Stay 3 minutes ahead. Stay 3 minutes ahead." It didn't make sense until I looked at the clock on the microwave, 3:21 a.m., and then at the time on the second phone, 3:18, 3 minutes apart. The house was 3 minutes ahead, or I was behind, and whatever version of me had left that message was either trying to warn me or trying to catch up. I grabbed the old phone, hit record, and said everything I could think of: my name, where I was from, what I remembered, what I feared, what I'd seen, just in case this version of me didn't survive the night, just in case this was the version that failed. I played it back, and on the recording, I heard my voice, but halfway through, it changed. It said everything I remembered, yes, but the part where I talked about seeing the reflection in the screen, that part wasn't in the playback. Instead, I heard myself say, "I never saw him. I only heard the door," and then silence. I didn't say that. Not in this version. Not in this house. I turned on all the lights. I opened every curtain. I stood in the center of the living room holding both phones and said out loud, "If you're me, prove it." Nothing happened. Not right away. But the static returned to the TV. The reflection in the screen smiled. And behind me, I heard the exact voice I'd used on the message say, "I've been trying to come home." I didn't turn around right away, because deep down I knew the voice behind me wasn't a threat in the traditional sense. It wasn't here to hurt or chase or corner me. It was here to replace something, maybe a decision, maybe a memory, maybe the entire sequence of events that led me to this house in the first place. And as I stared at the reflection on the TV, the one that no longer matched my posture or my breath or the way my shoulders sagged under fear, I realized something subtle had changed, not in the house, but in me. Like the version of myself I had always assumed was fixed and indivisible had started fracturing the moment I entered this place, and the cracks had been spreading ever since, filling with little inconsistencies that I had explained away as forgetfulness or deja vu or sleep deprivation. But now I saw them for what they were: pressure points, fault lines, a structure slowly collapsing inward. I turned around. Of course I did. And there I was, standing in the doorway, same face, same body, same breath, but different in the way a photo is different from a mirror, flattened, intentional, curated for something I didn't understand. He didn't speak again. He didn't move. He just watched me, like he was waiting to see whether I'd understand, whether I'd remember what this house had always been. Not a structure, not a location, but a point of return, a reset chamber for all the versions of myself that couldn't move forward. A place where the story loops back and asks the only question that matters: which one of us deserves to leave? And I realized I didn't know the answer. I didn't know if I had ever been the first. I didn't know if this version of me, the one standing here now, was the visitor or the original. I stepped toward him. So did he. Perfect sync. Then I stopped. He didn't. And in that moment, I saw it, just for a second, his smile. Too sharp, too confident, too complete. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key I'd used to open the house on the first day, held it up, tilted his head, and said, softly, "Your lease is over." Then the lights went out.